What's your thoughts on this whole AWS thing, Larry?
Oh man, my initial thoughts here, it's actually funny. So when I work with engineers and one of the security controls is continuity of services, right?
Yeah, right.
Everybody's in the cloud and their initial reaction is, well, we're using AWS. We don't have to worry about continuity of service because they have 99.9% uptime.
Yeah.
And I just think to myself, okay. So that's the first thing that came to mind is, yeah, this is the case where you need to have continuity of service. It depends on the size of the business as well. If you're a Fortune 500 company, you'll host some stuff in AWS. But if a situation like this happens, you want to have a mirrored environment in Azure. If AWS goes down, that was my first thoughts.